You know that feeling, right? Like you're just treading water in this ocean of information, maybe dense reports, stacks of academic papers,
Hmm.
and you're just wishing someone could, I don't know, dive in, grab the essential stuff and bring it straight to you. It's that information abundance feeling. It can be kind of paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge challenge today. The sheer volume, it just makes finding the really key insights pretty tough.
Exactly. And that's precisely our mission for this deep dive. We're going into the rigorous, often unseen world of scientific articles.
Right.
We want to explore not just what they are, but really why they're the foundation of scientific knowledge, how they're put together so meticulously, and those ethical guardrails, the ones that uphold their integrity.
Mm.
We've sifted through a whole load of comprehensive guides, actual scientific papers, ethical frameworks,
Fine.
basically trying to pull out the most important nuggets for you.
And hopefully by the end of this, you'll not just grasp how scientific knowledge gets created and shared, but you'll also get this powerful new lens, a way to critically evaluate and really appreciate the rigor behind it all.
Yeah, empowering you, the listener, to be a more informed consumer of the science shaping our world.
Exactly.
So, okay, if the scientific article is this fundamental block, what's its main purpose? It's way more than just reporting findings, isn't it?
Oh, much more. Our sources really frame it as the primary vehicle for knowledge diffusion. It's designed for rigorous communication, allowing for verification, reproduction.
And expansion by the whole global community.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it has this dual objective that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes, transmit the result, but also give enough detail so other researchers can completely reproduce the experiments.
Right, that reproducibility, that sounds critical.
It's the cornerstone. Think of it like the ultimate fact checker for scientific claims. Without it, a discovery is just, well, an interesting idea.
Just floating out there.
Yeah, you can't fully trust it, can't build on it. It might as well not exist in a scientific sense. It's what separates an observation from, a proven fact.
And the ultimate goal then is advancing knowledge for humanity, generating new discoveries.
That's the big picture, yes. Pushing boundaries. And the research, it isn't really seen as complete until it's published and, crucially, cited by others. That citation shows impact.
Okay, that brings up the whole impact question. How do we actually measure the impact of this scientific work? I know publication volume is often mentioned.
It still is, yeah. But our sources point to several other key metrics now. There's the journal impact factor, basically how often articles in that journal get cited.
Okay.
Then the raw number of citations a specific article gets. That directly shows its influence.
Makes sense. And I've heard of the H index.
The H index, yes. It tries to balance productivity, the number of papers, with the citation impact of those papers.
Gotcha.
But what's really emerging now, and quite interesting, is the rise of altmetrics.
Altmetrics, what's that exactly?
It measures the wider buzz, you could say, the research paper's repercussion on social media, in the news.
So beyond just the academic circles,
Yeah.
public engagement.
Exactly. It's a broader view of impact.
Okay, shifting gears to the writing itself. These fundamental qualities, clarity, precision, conciseness, you hear them a lot. But our sources say they're not just like stylistic suggestions.
Not at all. They are presented as fundamental conditions for scientific writing. Non-negotiable, really.
And they get really specific about it too. Like for conciseness, it's about cutting everything irrelevant, only necessary language.
Every word has to count. Short words, short phrases, short paragraphs. They even give recommendations, like phrases under 15 words, paragraphs maybe 7 to 14 lines in print.
Wow, that's specific.
Yeah, or max 4 lines on screen. And avoiding wordiness like, don't say realizar una investigación, if you can just say investigas. Or redundancies like resultados obtenidos instead of just resultados.
Cut the fat, basically.
Exactly. Then precision. That demands exactness. Every term, every expression should have one unique meaning. No room for ambiguity.
And crucially.
Every single affirmation must be backed by evidence. Concrete proof.
Okay. And clarity. That's about making it easy to read, easy to grasp quickly.
Right. Fluid organization, brief sentences, clear connections between ideas. It needs to flow logically.
And this ties into objectivity too, right? Impersonality.
Absolutely. Scientific writing has to be grounded in proofs and facts, not personal feelings. So, use the third person or impersonal structures. Avoid those flowery, superfluous adjectives.
Definitely no colloquialisms or literary tricks.
No. Avoid jargon unless it's standard and defined. Steer clear of ambiguous terms, local phrases that won't travel.
So let's boil this down for you, the listener. Why do these qualities, clarity, conciseness, precision, matter so much?
Because, as the sources stress, A lack of any of them hinders understanding. But more than that, it compromises reproducibility.
Ah, back to reproducibility.
Yes. If your writing isn't clear and precise, how can someone else possibly replicate your work accurately? It can effectively, well, ruin even a brilliantly conducted investigation.
Because no one can validate it or build on it?
Exactly. It stops the knowledge from contributing. These qualities aren't just good writing. They're inseparable from the scientific method itself.
It really puts a huge weight on every single word choice, doesn't it?
It does. It's the bedrock of trust in science.
Okay, let's move to the structure. The universal blueprint. I am read. Introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Sometimes IMRD in Spanish, right?
That's the one. It's the globally adopted standard for original research articles.
And the insight here is why it's the standard. It's not just random, is it?
Not at all. It's powerful because it directly mirrors the actual scientific research process. It follows the logic of discovery.
So it takes the reader on that journey.
Precisely. The introduction sets the stage. Here's the problem, here's a hypothesis. The method section says, here's exactly how we tried to solve it. Results. Here are the objective findings, just the facts, and then the discussion. Here's what we think it means, how it fits in the context.
That uniformity must make global communication way easier.
Immensely. And peer review, too. It standardizes things, making it much easier for you, the reader, to jump into a paper from anywhere in the world and quickly find what you need, understand the flow, and evaluate the research.
Makes sense. But it's not just I am read, right? There are other essential parts.
Oh, definitely. Beyond that core structure, you've got crucial components.
Right.
Like the title.
Right, the first impression.
Exactly. It needs to be attractive, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but also brief, maybe 12, 15 words, ideally specific, concise, and clear. That precision is vital for getting indexed correctly in databases, making it visible.
So no jargon or weird abbreviations in the title.
Best avoided, yes. Then you have the authors. Names, affiliations. And authorship isn't trivial. It implies substantial contribution and responsibility for the content. We'll dig into that more later.
Okay, what about the abstract, that little summary at the start?
Crucial. The abstract is a concise, totally self-sufficient summary, usually 150, 250 words. It has to cover the objective, methods, main results, and key conclusions.
And it's often the only part people read in databases, right?
Very often. So it has to be super informative, but strictly objective, no personal evaluation, and importantly, no internal citations within the abstract itself.
Got it. And keywords, those seem important for searching.
Vital. Usually 5 to 8 specific terms that capture the essence of the paper. Absolutely key for indexing and visibility.
Then the introduction itself that sets the context why the study mattered.
Right. Usually structured in 3 parts. What we already know, the gap or the specific question we're tackling, and then the study's specific objectives or hypothesis.
And materials and methods. You said this was critical for reproducibility.
Paramount. This section must provide enough excruciating detail for another competent researcher to replicate the experiments exactly, usually written personally, past tense.
Okay. Then results. Just the findings, no spin.
Exactly. Clear presentation of what you found without interpretation. This is where tables and figures are key for summarizing lots of data efficiently.
But don't repeat the data, right? If it's in a table, don't write it all out in the text, too.
Correct. Avoid duplication. Refer to the table or figure. Then comes the discussion and conclusions, often the trickiest part to write.
This is where the interpretation happens.
Yes. You interpret your results, compare them rigorously with findings from other studies, try to explain any inconsistencies.
And you should mention limitations, too.
Definitely. Discussing study limitations actually demonstrates objectivity and strengthens the paper. You also explain how your findings broaden what was known, what the implications might be for different audiences.
And the conclusions have to be firmly based on the data presented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No leaps of faith, fully justified by the results.
Okay. And briefly, there are things like acknowledgments.
Yes. Acknowledgments for people who helped but don't meet authorship criteria. And the references section listing only the works actually cited in the paper, essential for tracing the origin and context of ideas. Avoid gray literature or excessive self-citation.
And sometimes footnotes or supplementary data.
Right, for extra details that don't fit in the main text.
All right, let's pivot to strategy. This was a real eye-opener in the sources. A crucial, maybe often overlooked move for authors is to choose your target journal before you even start writing the paper.
Yes. This sounds counterintuitive, but it's presented as a massive strategic advantage. Before writing, you ask, what's the main message? Is it truly novel? Who needs to read this? and then pick the journal.
But why does that help so much?
Because every single journal has its own specific requirements, length limits, reference style, section formats, figure guidelines, and crucially, their specific audience and the kind of scope they cover.
Ah, so you tailor it from the start.
Exactly. Adapting your manuscript to that specific journal's guidelines right from the beginning saves an enormous amount of painful reformatting and rewriting later on.
And the sources mentioned desk rejection.
Yes. Submitting a paper that clearly ignores the journal's basic instructions is apparently a very common reason for editors to reject it outright, without even sending it for peer review.
So knowing the journal first significantly boosts your chances of even getting reviewed, let alone accepted.
Grammatically.
Yeah.
It makes publication planning an early, integral part of the writing strategy, not just something you think about at the very end.
Okay, that's a huge tip. Now here's another potentially surprising thing. The order of writing. It's not usually linear, is it?
Generally, no.
Mm.
The recommended pragmatic order is often start with method, then write up the results, then tackle the introduction followed by the discussion, and write the abstract absolutely last.
Okay, wait. Method, results, then introduction. That feels backwards. Why?
It's all about efficiency and logic. The method section describes what you did. Once the study is finished, that's fixed, known. Relatively easy to write down.
Okay, fair enough.
The results are the raw data, what you found.
Yeah.
They're descriptive and flow directly from the methods you just detailed. Again, fairly straightforward, just presenting the facts.
Right.
Now, the introduction. To write a good intro, you need a solid grasp of the existing literature and exactly where your study fits in, what gap it fills. You actually understand this much better after you've analyzed your own results.
Ah. So you define the context and problem after you know your contribution to solving it. That makes surprisingly good sense.
It does, right?
Okay.
You know what you found, so now you can frame the introduction to lead into it effectively. And the discussion. That integrates everything, your results, the intro's context, comparisons with literature. You can only really do that properly once the results and intro are finalized.
Okay, I'm seeing the logic.
Yeah.
And the abstract last because...
Because it's a mini summary of the entire finished paper. You can only write an accurate summary once everything else is written and polished.
So this nonlinear approach isn't just quirky. It actually minimizes rewriting and helps make the whole paper more coherent and higher quality.
That's the idea. It streamlines the process based on what information is solid and when.
Very clever. Okay, style points for clarity. Consistency of terms, that sounds important.
Crucial. Use one specific term for a key concept throughout the entire paper. Don't use synonyms just for a variety if it could possibly create ambiguity. Stick to the established term.
And acronyms and abbreviations.
Define them clearly the very first time you use them, both in the abstract and in the main text. Then use the acronym consistently.
And avoid barbarisms. What are those exactly?
Basically, stick to accepted language. Avoid unaccepted foreign words or creating jargon that isn't standard in the field.
Sure.
Keep sentences concise and clear.
And proofreading. Seems obvious but vital.
Absolutely essential. Meticulous proofreading. And the sources strongly recommend getting multiple other people to review the article before submission. Fresh eyes catch things you miss.
External perspectives find those blind spots. Makes sense.
Indispensable, really.
And finally, leveraging visuals. Tables and figures. They're not just decoration.
Far from it. They are incredibly powerful tools for summarizing large amounts of data effectively. Graphics, like charts and plots, are generally best for showing trends and relationships.
While tables are better for
presenting precise numerical data. But the key rule, again, is no duplication. If the exact data is clearly presented in a table, don't just repeat it all sentence by sentence in the text. Refer the reader to the visual.
use them efficiently.
Exactly. Let them do the heavy lifting for data presentation.
You know, we've talked about the structure and strategy, but the ethical dimension seems huge here. The sources point out this tension, the noble goal of sharing knowledge versus the intense pressure on authors to publish.
It's a significant issue. That pressure, often tied directly to career advancement, funding, tenure, it can unfortunately lead to an increase in scientific misconduct.
It's a paradox, isn't it? The system meant to drive progress can sometimes incentivize cutting corners.
Precisely. When the academic reward system emphasizes quantity, just getting papers out over, perhaps, the quality or significance, It creates this high-pressure environment.
And one major area where this pressure manifests is around authorship and contribution.
Absolutely. Authorship should signify genuine intellectual contribution, right? And taking responsibility for the work. The criteria usually involve significant input into the conception, design, data analysis, interpretation, drafting the article, or critically revising it, plus final approval.
But there are problematic practices that creep in, like honorary or gift authorship.
Right. That's including someone as an author, maybe a senior figure, a department head who didn't actually contribute significantly. It might be done as a favor or to try and boost the paper's prestige or chances of acceptance because of that person's name.
And the flip side, ghost authorship.
That's when someone does make substantial contributions, often professional medical writers, especially in industry-funded studies, but they aren't listed as authors. This can mask potential biases or influences on the research.
That seems deeply problematic for transparency.
It is. And generally, though it varies by field, the author order often signifies the level of contribution. The first author usually did the most hands-on work, and the last author is often the senior researcher or PI overseeing the project.
Okay. Then there are the really big ethical violations. Plagiarism and duplication.
The cardinal sins, absolutely. Plagiarism is basically stealing, appropriating someone else's ideas, words, images, processes, results, whatever, without giving proper credit, presenting it as your own original work.
Even just reordering someone else's sentences without citation.
Yes, that counts too. It's broader than just copy-pasting. And then there's auto-plagiarism or self-plagiarism.
Reusing your own stuff. How is that plagiarism?
It's about redundant publication. You can't just republish substantial portions of your own previously published work in a new article without proper citation and, crucially, permission from the copyright holder, which is often the first journal. Journals want original, unpublished work.
So submitting essentially the same study to multiple journals is a no-go.
Definitely not. That's considered serious misconduct and subject to sanctions, like retraction. The core principle is submitted work must be original and unpublished. And journals are using sophisticated software now to detect plagiarism and duplication.
They're checking actively.
Very actively. And another key ethical point is conflict of interest.
Financial ties, personal relationships.
Anything that could potentially bias the work or its interpretation. Authors, reviewers, and editors all have a responsibility to declare any potential conflicts openly. It's fundamental for transparency and maintaining objectivity.
So it really sounds like everyone involved in the publication process has a distinct ethical role to play.
Absolutely. Authors have the primary responsibility to avoid any kind of fraud, data fabrication, falsification, plus plagiarism, auto-plagiarism. They must cite sources meticulously and get permissions for any copyrighted material like images.
And the reviewers. The peer reviewers.
They're the expert gatekeepers. Their duties are honesty, impartiality, providing constructive criticism, and maintaining confidentiality of the manuscript. Crucially, they cannot use ideas from the manuscript for their own research before it's published.
And they shouldn't suggest citing their own papers just to boost their stats.
No, that's unethical coercion. Review should be based purely on the scientific merit. And there are different types of peer review, as you mentioned earlier: open, single-blind, double-blind.
Double-blind being maybe the most impartial.
Often considered so, as it minimizes bias by hiding identities both ways, though each system has pros and cons.
And the editors, they're like the ultimate decision makers.
Yes, they have a huge responsibility. Promoting good practices, making accept-reject decisions based solely on scientific merit and relevance to the journal, even if the results are negative or null.
Negative results are important too, right?
Vitally important to publish. Editors ensure a robust and fair peer review process, maintain confidentiality, are responsible for publishing corrections or retractions if needed, and should uphold editorial autonomy, free from undue influence.
Are there organizations overseeing all this?
Yes. Groups like COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, are very influential. They develop guidelines and provide resources on best practices for journals, editors, authors, and reviewers worldwide.
So there's guidance out there.
Lots of guidance. And while formal ethics training is important, the sources also highlight something perhaps even more powerful: responsible researchers acting as strong role models. Seeing mentors conduct and publish research ethically often has a bigger impact than just reading rules.
Leading by example again. Makes total sense.
It really does.
Okay, let's shift to the collaborative nature of science. It feels like research is rarely a solo act anymore.
That's definitely what the sources emphasize. Modern scientific research is portrayed as an inherently collaborative effort. The complexity of today's problems, the need for diverse specializations, it makes teamwork pretty much indispensable.
Research isn't just one person in a lab coat anymore.
Not usually, no. It often requires interdisciplinary, even transdisciplinary teams with different people tackling different stages of the knowledge production process.
And within these teams, there are defined roles. The research leader, or principal investigator, PI, sounds like the key figure.
Typically, yes. The PI is usually the scientific leader, the one who conceptualized the project, secured funding, and oversees everything. They're the project administrator, too.
So for you, the listener, what's the bottom line on the PI's role?
The PI is essentially the ultimate guarantor of the project's integrity and how it's shared. If there's an ethical issue, a major flaw in the data or analysis in the published paper, the buck ultimately stops with the PI. Their supervision and final approval cover everything.
Even if a mistake was made by someone more junior?
Yes, the responsibility rests with the leader. Then you often have co-investigators.
What's their role?
They make significant scientific and operational contributions. They're co-responsible for the technical aspects, active throughout the project, and sometimes can even stand in for the PI.
Okay, now here's a role our sources highlighted as maybe surprisingly critical. The research assistant.
Yes, their contribution can be absolutely vital, even if it seems like they're doing more technical tasks.
Like what kind of tasks?
Data collection, data analysis, running experiments, doing exhaustive literature searches, creating figures and tables, organizing materials, preparing initial results summaries.
And why is their diligence so crucial for the final article?
Think about it. If the data collection is flawed, if measurements are inaccurate, or if data isn't validated correctly by the assistant.
Then the entire results section is built on sand.
Exactly. Which means the discussion interpreting those results will be wrong, and the conclusions will be unfounded. The whole paper's validity is compromised right at the source.
And a poor literature search
Means they might miss critical prior work, making the study seem more novel than it is, or failing to build on existing knowledge correctly. So the meticulousness of the research assistant directly impacts the integrity and value of the final publication.
Wow, that really elevates the importance of that role. Now, with all these collaborators, how do we fairly recognize who did what?
That's where the credit contributor rules taxonomy comes in. It's a system designed for exactly that, providing a transparent and much more detailed way to describe each person's specific contributions.
Instead of just a list of names.
Right. Credit offers a standardized list of roles. Things like conceptualization, methodology, software, validation, formal analysis, investigation, data curation, writing original draft, writing review and editing, visualization, supervision, project administration, funding acquisition.
That's incredibly granular.
It is. So what does this mean for you? It means credit directly tackles those ethical problems like honorary authorship or ghost authorship we talked about.
Because you have to specify what someone actually did.
Exactly. It provides a standard format for authors to declare precisely who contributed what. This promotes fairness, accountability, transparency, and gives a much more accurate picture of how collaborative research actually happens. It's a really important development.
Definitely sounds like it. And how do these teams actually manage the collaboration, especially if they're spread out? Digital tools must be key.
Absolutely essential. Technology has completely revolutionized scientific collaboration. It's way beyond just emailing documents back and forth now. These tools are critical for handling the complex, data-heavy, multidisciplinary projects common today.
What kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, there are general collaborative writing platforms. Many people use things like Google Docs, Microsoft Word with its collaboration features, Dropbox Paper. They offer real-time editing, comments, version history, sometimes integrated chat.
Okay, familiar stuff. But are there tools specifically for researchers?
Yes, and some are very powerful. Tools like Authoria are designed specifically for writing scientific articles, often with features like easy citation integration and formatting for specific journals. SciSpace is another one focused on research writing.
What about managing all those references?
Reference managers like Zotero or Mendeley are indispensable. They help collect, organize, cite, and share references, often allowing shared libraries for teams. And platforms like the Open Science Framework, OSF, help manage entire research projects, including data sharing and collaboration, promoting transparency.
And AI is playing a role now, too.
A rapidly growing one. There are AI tools designed to help with literature search and analysis. Think Consensus, Elicit, Scopus AI. They can synthesize information from many papers incredibly quickly.
Tools for actually running AI models.
Yes. Things like Llama or LM Studio let researchers run language models locally, which can be important for data privacy.
Hmm.
And then there's AI that can even help synthesize information or draft sections of articles, like the STORM project from Stanford.
That's quite advanced.
It is. So for you, the listener, the takeaway is that these sophisticated digital tools aren't just conveniences. They enable greater efficiency, better precision, enhanced transparency, and ultimately can contribute to higher quality research outcomes by facilitating complex teamwork. They're really transforming the nuts and bolts of how science gets done.
It's a whole ecosystem supporting the research. So, for researchers or aspiring authors listening, where can they find more help? Are there key resources?
Definitely. The sources we looked at mention a wealth of guidance. There are classic guiding manuals on scientific writing, like books by Robert Day and Barbara Gastel or Jose Mari Mutt for Spanish speakers. These cover everything from structure to style and detail.
So, comprehensive handbooks exist.
Yes. And beyond books, there are many specialized articles published in journals that focus specifically on common writing errors or delve deeper into ethical considerations like authorship disputes or avoiding plagiarism. Searching for those can be very helpful.
What about finding the right journal or getting the work seen?
There are platforms and databases designed for that. Things like Silo readily focus on promoting standards and open access, especially in certain regions. Latindex, MIR, JournalSeek are examples of databases that help researchers identify potential journals that fit their scope and impact goals.
So, tools to navigate the publication landscape.
Exactly. And finally, never underestimate the value of continuous learning. Taking specialized courses or workshops on scientific writing, data visualization, or research ethics can make a huge difference in becoming an effective scientific communicator.
Always more to learn.
Always.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like we've unpacked a lot. The scientific article isn't just a report, it's this incredibly rigorous, ethically bound, and increasingly collaborative vehicle for human knowledge.
That's a great summary. We've touched on its core purpose, diffusion, and reproducibility. Its near universal structure, IMROD, reflecting the scientific process itself.
Right, in that strategic, nonlinear way, it's often best written choosing the journal first, writing methods and results before the intro.
And the absolutely critical ethical imperatives around authorship, avoiding plagiarism and duplication, declaring conflicts of interest.
Plus, the vital role of the entire research team, from the PI down to the research assistant, and how modern digital tools and frameworks like credit are enabling and shaping that collaboration.
It's a complex but fascinating process built on layers of methodology, strategy, and ethical consideration.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given everything we've discussed, the incredible rigor, the layers of ethical safeguards, the intense collaborative effort that goes into producing just one credible scientific article, what does this make you consider about the tsunami of other information you encounter every single day? News headlines, social media posts, summaries of studies.
That's a powerful question. How might really understanding the meticulous, demanding process behind a genuine scientific article change how you perceive other claims presented as facts or research findings out there in the wild?
Maybe it encourages a bit more critical thinking about sources.
Perhaps. We'd certainly encourage you to maybe explore one of the resources we mentioned if you're interested, or simply take a moment next time you see a research claim and think a little more deeply about the likely journey behind it, or perhaps the journey it didn't take.